Welcome. My name is Eliza Brown. I work in the Office of Labor and Employer Relations, and I'm going to moderate this panel with this amazing group of people. One of the things that we all know is that getting the conversation started, whatever that conversation is about our career development, can be difficult. It's not an easy thing to get started, as Jackie so eloquently pointed out with that amazing story from 1976. I've got a little teary. So we know it's not easy and can be challenging in the best of circumstances. So we want to acknowledge that, and with that in mind, we'll sort of get started. I wanted to start with just having the panelists just say hello, give their brief introduction with a name, what their current position is, how many years they've been at Harvard, and how many times they've moved around.
Hi, I'm Ellen Mahoney. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer at Harvard Business School. I've been at Harvard 34 years. I was laughing when Jackie was talking about the 70s. I've been in 7 different jobs during that time, and I've worked in 3 different units. So I worked in the FAS, then I worked in Central Human Resources, and currently at the Business School.
Hi, I'm Edith Lehman, and I work as a senior. I think it's fine. Yeah, I work as a senior administrative and academic projects coordinator at Harvard University IT. I've been here for 4 years, so 34 minus 30.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Gumbel. I'm the Managing Director of Administration for Harvard University IT. I've been at Harvard for 15 years. I've worked in 3 different groups in a variety of roles. I started in the government and community affairs, moved to the president's office, and now work in IT.
Hi, my name is Lakeisha Martin, and I work at the Harvard Dental Center. I am a stabilization lead. I've been at Harvard since 2004.
How's it going, everybody? I'm Steve Foote. I'm the media services team lead here at the law school. I've been working on and off for the same department since I was a sophomore in college in the late 90s, and I've been in this particular role for almost 4 years now.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions just to sort of prime the pump and get us all warmed up, and then hopefully open it up to everybody else here. And if nobody chimes in, I have some backup questions in the bag if you guys are too quiet.
But come on, no,
yeah, but I'd much rather hear questions from y'all. So I want to start with Stephanie and Adetta, because they're sort of a staff management pair. They work in the same department. And one of the things, conversation about career development, sort of capital C, can really take a bunch of different shapes. It can be a series of small chats that you have with your manager on an ongoing basis. It can be one sort of Mac Daddy yearly conversation. Can you just share a little bit about what that's been like for the two of you, and how you went about it and how the conversations took shape?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So in my career at Harvard, I've been so fortunate to have had many mentor managers who have really either been directly involved in getting my next job, or who have counseled me on whether or not to take another position. And so, as Jackie mentioned earlier, I just felt like when I became a manager, I really wanted to pay it forward. So in order to bring about people's best work, you really have to, as a manager, learn a little bit more about them. So whenever I meet someone, either in the recruitment stage or if it's their first day of work, I really start to create a safe place to talk about what their interests or strengths might be that may not be on display all the time, because you really want to connect them to meaningful work that way and make sure that they know that there are, I'm always going to be looking out for their best interests or to connect them with other opportunities. And so when Adita and I became partners in our Hewitt endeavors, I really, wanted, in getting to know her better, just asked her, what are your interests? What are your long-term interests? What do you hope to get out of this position? Are there any opportunities today that you're not directly involved in that you would like to be involved in? And then just keep my eyes and ears open for those opportunities for her.
Mm-hmm. And as you can see, the environment for having career conversations is very good in my office. So we actually never had, I don't think we ever had one eventful milestone conversation. instead, as Steph mentioned, we had a series of chats. We keep having ongoing chats. We've worked together for 3 years now. So it was never difficult for me for us to engage in those sort of conversations. In my case, the difficulty laid in the role I was in a little bit, because I began working for Hewitt as a senior executive assistant to the CIO, to the Chief Information Officer, which was a fantastic job, but this is one of those roles that actually doesn't have a clearly defined career progression paths. So what I thought I would do, and what Steph actually eventually encouraged, was looking around and finding ways that I could get engaged, that I could grow within the office, I could learn more. And as a teacher, former teacher, teacher by profession, I kind of naturally navigated towards initiatives that had to do with teaching and learning. And the good thing is that the office of the UCIO, University Chief Information Officer, is a place, it's a focal point of where many different programs and initiatives meet and cross paths. And so I had tons of opportunities to look around and to learn and kind of test waters. And when my office initiated a new program, a new internal career development program called IT Academy, I volunteered to facilitate one of their courses, which was fantastic. And I continued to take those courses. And if there are any IT people here, I strongly advise you to take one. So it was one of them. However, there were. If I may I continue?
Yeah, and then I'm watching the clock. I want to move on to Steve and Stephanie.
So I have a kind of less easy story, I think. A more difficult moment actually happened when I wanted to apply, when a position opened within my organization that I wanted to apply for. So it was an internal move. I couldn't keep it a secret. And we talked, and Steph encouraged me to apply, which I did. And I interviewed some more. I'm sure many of you know the process. I actually got to be one of the two runners up, and I didn't get the job, which was quite disappointing, as you can imagine. And I kind of had to deal with it, and I did. There was a good twist to the story because Steph continued to be very supportive, and when it turned out that the unit I applied to needed someone to help them part-time, my office arranged things so I was able to actually join them for half a year, one semester assignment, which was another great development opportunity. And I think in general, at least in my case, at least based on my experience, I don't think those one huge, terrible, and terrifying conversations need to happen, as long as there is some sort of conducive environment in your office that you can just keep going, keep your eyes open, and exploring various avenues.
Thank you both. Y'all are great models for how this can work, right? And how to have that kind of relationship. And it's a good segue into the idea that that isn't always the case, right? So we don't always have that kind of relationship with our manager. So this is really a question directed to Steve and Stephanie. Just, I think we all have some sort of fear that when we do try to have this conversation, that there might be some sort of subtle retaliation or maybe a general just divestment in us as a colleague if we express the desire to move on or move away from the department or grow in our career. So can you just talk a little bit about how you manage that and how you stay invested and how that has worked for both of you?
Sure. I would say if you're a manager and you're not invested in someone's career growth, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice and you're doing that person a disservice. Even if you don't have a job transition they can follow, there's definitely a lot of opportunities to increase somebody's skills. And if you're a manager and you are faced with a challenge where someone's expressing the interest to grow in their career and you don't help them grow, you're basically going to create a disengaged employee. And nobody wants that. So how do you leverage what you know about the person and align that with skills that they're interested in developing that also reflect positively for your organization? Because if you can't give them a new job, you can at least help encourage to grow and develop skills that will increase their worth. But ultimately, you have to realize that, you're not going to retain every employee forever. Some people might be comfortable in the role that they're in based on where they are in their career. Some people might be at the very beginning of their career. In our office, we have mostly junior staff. We hire a lot of Northeastern co-op students, and then we end up hiring as full-time employees because we're investing in their growth as co-op students, trying to treat them like full-time employees. And that's really benefited us significantly. But at the same time, we know once they hit a certain point in their career, we can't keep them on the front line of like an IT staff anymore, of looking for the next challenge. We try to build that in with a career competency ladder and give them those opportunities. Some organizations don't have a big enough availability of different types of jobs to build that growth. So in a situation like that, you always just got to make sure that you're actively working on investing in them and developing their skill set, knowing that one day you're going to lose this employee and hopefully you're going to lose it to either a different group in your department or another school at Harvard and not have them leave Harvard as a whole.
And I wanted to get Ellen and Lakeisha two questions, but do you have something quick to add to that?
Sure, just quick. I think just two things. On the manager side, I think it's important to recognize that you have a multiplier effect. So good traits are going to foster other good traits, and then bad traits will foster bad traits. So creating an environment of openness and trust is really important. But on the staff side, I think that there's a saying, don't leave your job before you leave your job, and timing is key. So, when you're preparing for this conversation, don't ask too early. If you haven't been there quite a year, it's probably not ready to make the next move. Try to recognize, be cognizant of organizational stress. Don't ask in those times. But maybe ask after a big win, after you've accomplished something that's notable, and then say, I want to build on this to kind of start the conversation with your manager. And I think that those could be helpful tips.
I think that's a great suggestion, and again, leads into, I wanted to just get Ellen, I wanted to get your perspective on this. How can you help us alleviate some of these fears about having these conversations from where you sit in HR?
So let's start with a couple questions. How many in here manage? How many people in here manage other people? Hands, okay. How many in here report to faculty members? Okay, because that's a little bit different. That's a different world right there. That's good to know. How many have children? How many parent? All right. So that kind of covers everyone in the room. And I think one thing we have to remember is something that Jackie said earlier when she was in her keynote speaker, if you weren't here. She said, your job is not necessarily your career. So the career is when you look back and look at the pattern of jobs that you had, but a job in itself can be a 35-year career, but it also can be a piece of the journey that you're on. So I know we've got these really informed managers here, which is amazing, but we don't all encounter that in life. And yet in life, we go through changes in relationships with everyone. So my daughter's graduating from 8th grade. We have our kids are in class together. They're going to move on to another. I'm going to have a different relationship with her in 10 years than I have now. I am. Because God willing, she's moved out of my house. So that will be a good moment, right? So that being said, I think in life, our relationships with each other change. And yet people don't like change and they dread it. So often a manager's resistance to having this conversation has little to do with their lack of support of you. In fact, they probably are very supportive of you. It has more to do with them fearing change, having to have a new relationship, and actually grieving the loss of that relationship with you. So I think you have to start with the feeling that managers are either thought less about it in the sense that it doesn't occur to them that you would ever want to work anywhere else, faculty members, you're passionate about my work. We both are. We're going to be tenured together for 15 years. You're like, no, we're not. Or a manager that just fears change and disruption and having to interview and hire and find someone who's as good a match as you are. So if you approach the conversation, not in the first 2 months, but if you approach the as Stephanie said, after a win or after at least a year, please do not have this conversation with me within 3 months. It makes me crazy. But if you have this conversation about, what do you see next to me in the department as far as extra duties go, extra jobs? Could I move somewhere in the department? Take it broader, in the school or the unit. Then take it broader, maybe somewhere at Harvard. So you're showing your commitment to the job, but you're asking about them investing in you. What can I do to leave this place in really good shape so that if I do leave and see an opportunity, someone else can come in and pick it up easily? I will be available. I'm not going away from you. I'm going to just think about how to make this as easy as possible. So just keep that in mind as you talk to people. And I'd love to hear from Lakeisha about her own experiences, because this curiosity of mine that we hear explained here is something that she was explaining to us the other day, which I thought was really a great example.
It was, and I do want you to bring that up because we met together and really planned the panel and got to know each other a little bit. And I want you to talk a little bit about what Ellen mentioned. And also, one of the things I learned about you is that you have sort of weathered a reorg, which we all sort of fear and have a lot of anxiety about. And I'd love for you to just touch on how you sort of stayed on your career path, how you weathered that situation. It can be just a time of real uncertainty for everybody. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, being part of Harvard Dental at the time when they were going through a reorg, I tried to stay positive as much as possible, but and make sure that my work ethic always showed. And I ended up meeting a consultant who came to the school to try to help them improve, and this consultant basically had me enter a meeting. And I got into the meeting, and I'm looking around the room, and I'm like, why am I here? Because it's, I didn't feel like I belonged there. And after the meeting was over, I figured out that I was the one that was going to help, at the time, my manager. She we were supposed to barcode some instruments, and that was part of the assignment, and that was the reason why I was in the room. So basically, I was in this room, and I came out of it with knowing that I was going to be the one to give her the assistance. And at that time, it was just being positive and moving around and trying to work in a way that I got noticed, because it was hard being a new person, and people didn't like the change in the organization. So it was hard for me to navigate and get around certain things, because individuals looked at, why did I want to do all these things? Why is she signing up for all this? Mm-hmm. But I felt like it was an opportunity to learn different skills, to get myself out there, to network. And when it was all said and done, I kind of understood why I ended up in that meeting.
How about questions from out here? We have a little bit of time. You have an amazing resource. Yes?
I'd like to get a couple of perspectives. I think most of us have had the experience at some point where you come into a situation where you've been promoted and you're inheriting a staff that did not get promoted. And that can be awkward, especially if you were once peers. If anybody has any sort of wisdom on that can be especially tricky to be sensitive and aware of that trickiness, but also to still step into the role of being a good supportive manager.
Okay. And maybe there's a way to relate that too to maybe colleagues who maybe a colleague gets promoted and another one didn't, just so it's relatable to everybody who might not be a manager. Stephanie, you want to?
Sure. I mean, I think that those situations definitely happen. I've had that experience myself, and I think you have to have the right amount of both engagement and detachment from the situation. So, the dynamic you set up is very important. Starting with trust and openness, understanding what is still motivating for the person in the role is really important. So there's always if if the person it does not want to, that maybe that was once your peer who is now your direct report, there's got to be something within the role that's still engaging to them. And if you guys can't uncover it together, then that's a real problem. But surely, I think going into the situation openly and kind of asking those questions about, so you didn't go in the direction you wanted to go, but what is there still left that you want to do? What still is exciting to you in the role? What still could make you happy? I think just starting that conversation can get you on the right foot, and then it'll be sort of trial and error along the way. But I think if you can start by setting a dynamic of trust and openness, it can help that situation.
Anybody else?
Been promoted, right?
Yeah, it can definitely be challenging. I think one of the things that's very important is to just reassure with the staff that the job we do is still the job we do, regardless of whether I'm in this role or this new role. And we all have responsibilities that we have to tackle together. And just make sure that the people feel comfortable that, like, listen, as your supervisor, I'm still going to listen to your input. I'm still going to consider the things you say. And just reinforce that we're all here for the same mission. One of the things that I found pretty helpful, I had applied for a couple jobs throughout the years that I didn't get that were given to some of my coworkers. And the hiring manager at the time pulled each person aside individually that had applied for the job and spoke to him and said, are you going to be okay if you do not get the role? And just prepped everybody. When there's 3 people in the same organization going for one job, only one of them is getting it. So working with the manager before they announce who gets the job to set expectations correctly with everybody else. So if you're the person who's accepted the position and you don't feel comfortable doing it, work on a strategy with your manager to make sure that that message is delivered clearly before a public announcement's made.
Good. How about another question? Anybody got a burning question? Paul?
What do they, people who manage people, when someone's coming in for an interview, what do you look for before the interview, during the interview, and after the interview? What are the kind of top 1 or 2 things that you think about for selecting an interview?
I look for things like curiosity. I look at temperament a lot. Is this person, going to be able to switch gears? Are they married or rigid to certain ways of doing things, or are they going to come in openly? Like, this is an environment of learners, and so being open in this environment is really important. So I usually look at temperament and curiosity before I even look at where someone went to school or what the menu of skills they have are, because you can learn on the job, but if you don't go in with the right sort of mindset, it's very hard to shift that later.
Does anybody want to add to that?
I think the one thing I'd add is for internal candidates, and I'm sure the recruiters will talk about this, I've just spent years watching internal candidates shoot themselves in the foot because they do not come in as prepared as the external candidates. There's an assumption of being in family, which is a huge leg up. I mean, that is really, really huge. But people get gossipy about, well, that professor rolled their eyes. I mean, it's shocking that it's not a lack of professionalism because everyone's very professional. It's more of a coziness that I think in the first interview you've got to be careful about. Externals come in, they've researched the organization, they've looked at the recent gifts the school's received, they've looked at different types of things that faculty are working on that are current, and they just are spit shine in their shoes before they walk in. And internals often are not coming in with that much prep. The leg up is huge and it has huge value, and over 25% of the jobs at Harvard are filled by internals, and I am a huge proponent. But I think we have to be sure that we take advantage of that in a good way. Don't get gossipy, just don't. Just resist. This is my tip.
And yes, please.
Thank you. And just to follow up on the issue of internal versus external candidates. Years ago, it used to be a policy that when a position was advertised, there was actually a no, as I checked the seats.
Oh, as a strong internal candidate, yes.
Candidate. I don't see it anymore. And what's the policy right now, and what's the meaning of having an internal candidate as opposed to?
Well, I'm asking Paul because we do still use it. We don't use it as much as we used to, and there's actually debate going on about from the team that helps us think about equal opportunity, about whether that actually discourages a diverse pool of candidates. So there's a debate about whether that's helpful or not. So Chris, Paul, do you guys know where that stands right now? We still use
Or
it.
Lori, do you have any insight?
Laura, do
into
you
that?
know?
It's just a school-by-school decision.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some schools will use it all the time, some schools will use it on a case-by-case basis, and some don't use it at all.
And often we're looking, sometimes we take it off just because we're looking, it might be a job we fill more than once, and we're looking for a really great pool of candidates. And so it's awesome to have the job out there to see who it's going to net. So it's a good way to attract candidates.
And you, in the networking room, you have representatives from each school. So given that it is school by school, you could maybe query them directly. So we have just a couple more minutes, and one of the themes I wanted to highlight that I think Jackie brought up and the panel has brought up is this idea of building relationships. It seems very, very important, and not only just relationships, but relationships of trust. Does anybody have a last-minute thing that they want to say on that? Okay.
Sure. I was having a conversation with our CIO earlier about this, and it's just really important to remember that you are the person who's in charge of your career growth. Your manager is there to help you and encourage you, and hopefully they see the value in that, but ultimately this is on you to figure out what you want to do and make the moves that will help you further your career. That being said, no one's going to be willing to invest time in you if you're not kicking ass at the job you're doing right now. So the number one thing you can do to further your career is do the best job you can possibly do in the position you're in. That actions speak louder than words. People around you will notice how well you're doing, and once you feel super confident in what you're doing, if the next career opportunity isn't there, get involved in other ways. There's lots of different things. So at the law school specifically, we have a program called Emerging Leaders. It's a staff-run, staff-developed program. 15 people a year get accepted into it, and there's a bunch of different sessions that teach you about leadership. So that's a way that you can get involved. It's a small thing, commencement, volunteers, stuff like that. We have a thing called Fridays at 4 at the law school every other month where it's just like a networking opportunity. So if you're doing great in your current position and you're taking advantage of all these networking opportunities, people are going to start to notice who you are, and it will help further your career.
Thank you. Now, do we have till 1:30 or 1:15?
Yeah, 1:30.
Oh, excellent. So we have 15 more minutes. I was thinking ahead of my head it's 1:15. So let's do more questions. Who else? Anybody else? Burning question? Oh, yes, please.
So I'd be interested in advice for non-exempt employees who might be at bandwidth with the tasks on their plate but would like to take on new projects, maybe offer something of value to the department, but if the department doesn't have resources available for overtime, what are maybe some ways to be flexible and take on new challenges while meeting current expectations?
I was pointing to Lakeisha because you had really some amazing experience with that. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
I think you should take the opportunity to go inside the organization, other departments. If you can't get any extra work within your own department, I think it's very helpful to go within other departments because you'll meet people and you'll be amazed on how you guys can connect, how they also maybe need you as well. And I find that when you network a lot of times, you'll find places where you can find some connections, some very valuable connections, and I think that's a good way to start.
Does anybody have
And
any?
you had flexibility to go teach.
Yes, and it happened because we talked about it, and but yes, it's, as I said, reaching out and looking for opportunities to learn, basically to echo Jackie's speech. This is a key, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most disappointing things as a manager is to not have the position to give someone, not have flexibility with FTEs. You know someone's at the point where they can grow and move on to something else, but you don't have that next opportunity to give them. And so I welcome the ideas that come, and Adita brought me a really good one, which is, there's a project going on in this other department. Is there any way we can figure this out? And other team members stepped up and we figured it out. And so I was very grateful that, that she brought the idea to me because I couldn't see it, and so some people say your career's not a ladder, it's a lattice. You know, you don't always go up, but sometimes you move around. And I think it's just important to kind of see the whole network and expand your horizons. And so it may not happen in your vertical organization, but if you look horizontally, you might see something.
Okay. Anybody else?
Can I provide some advice?
Yes.
So just a thing, just having been at Harvard for a long time, just a couple thoughts. If you're a manager in the room, and a lot of you did raise your hands, open the door. You know, say to people, so tell me, what is like your 3-year plan? What's your 5-year plan? Just hear them out. Just hear what they have to say. People just welcome the conversation, and that alone can actually lead to engagement and retention. Knowing that they can have the conversation can be very helpful. If you're staff members, and you can't have this conversation with your manager because they aren't as fabulous as everyone on this panel to have that conversation, there's a ton of things you can do to prepare yourself for the next move. A lot of them are being talked about this morning by Marilyn and Jackie. Research the environment. There are open doors at every single part of the organization. You can go talk to HR people. They're listed on the CWD website. They're kind of open office hours. You can go and talk to them. That's on your lunch hour. You can do that without anyone knowing. It's fine. You can explore it. Find out by reading job descriptions that are posted, that are just open to the whole world. What's out there? What credentials might I need? What experience might I need? So that I can kind of get a sense of what that might mean that I can do for myself. And as everyone else is saying, master your own reputation. When I was first hired at Harvard, someone said despite how much people argue about what their title should be, no one knows what your title is. If you're not a professor, and who cares, right? Dean, director, assistant director, chief, whatever the heck, it's fine. No one knows what it is but you and maybe your mom. Okay, nobody knows. So your reputation is what precedes you everywhere you go. You know I can count on so-and-so. If you call so-and-so, they will get back to you. I know you'll get a response from so-and-so. Be that person, and then your phone will ring. A lot of people say to me, is someone going to tap me on the shoulder and tell me my next job? And it's like, no, they're not. So you just have to be open and ready, but own your reputation, as everyone was saying.
One of the things that we hope you'll take on the way out, we have sort of a do's and don'ts, a handout about getting these conversations started and some actual conversation starters. But I thought I'd ask the panel, so from the hiring manager perspective, when you have a staff person coming to you to talk about their career development, how would you like to see them have prepared? And then from the staff perspective, how have you prepared for those conversations? Whoever wants to start.
Begin?
Yep.
I think preparation is in thinking. It's you basically sit down and figure out what you want to do or what you might want to do, because actually knowing what you want to do is a luxury. And then I think, and again I am assuming there is some sort of ongoing relationship with your manager. You have an ongoing relationship with manager. And I think using the conversations with your manager as a way to actually focus your thinking, your ideas, is a very good way of progressing, because chances are that they actually know more, know more of what's going on, what's available, what's realistic for you, which is actually a very important part of the whole decision. What can I realistically do? Yeah.
How about another perspective, maybe from the manager perspective?
I think having concrete ideas is important. As Steve said earlier, your career is your responsibility. So if someone wants to have a conversation about growing or promotions, I don't want it to be that they come in and just say, promote me, but maybe more like, this is an opportunity. This is a way I see I can help the organization better, or this is what I want to do, and be a little bit more specific. And then we can kind of find the support to navigate through that particular track, other than just sort of coming in very open, like, I know I'm ready, but I don't know for what. So just having some sense, as Aditya was saying too, of what you want to do is really important, and it will help your manager help you. It's almost like, help me, help you. So I think that level of preparation. But other than that, there's no judgment about where someone wants to take their career. And so having that idea is, it might not be within our organization or it might be. And so just being fairly open about what the person wants to do is also, I think, important for managers.
And Lakeisha, did you have something to add from the staff?
I think your performance review is a great way to get that conversation started. I mean, you're paired with your manager to come up with goals and ideas, and it's a great way to start that conversation. So I think your performance review is a great way to start.
So for people who are really timid and not sure they feel comfortable in starting the conversation, one of the tactics you can try is ask the person about their own career development and their own career growth. Invest in them and get them excited about investing in you because you're expressing interest. I have a pretty good relationship with one of my managers, so I walked in her office and just handed her a job description. I was like, this is my dream job. If you have that kind of relationship, you can do something like that. And what it helped me do is she worked with me to identify what are some of the skills I could work on strengthening, so when a job opportunity like this happens and I apply again, I'll actually get hired for said job.
That's great.
That's great.
So any last minute questions from out here? Anything else?
And by the way, if you can't talk to your manager, and we understand, especially in faculty relationships, it's not always as easy. They're not professional managers. And even some professional managers aren't professional managers, so because they got promoted from within, which is great, but it's a different skill. Talk to your HR person. They usually can be a very discreet, confidential resource for you, and help keep an eye open and help support you too. So know that you're not alone. Sometimes it can get very frustrating in a job if you think you're ready for something next and you see no light at the end of the tunnel. But there's so many things you can do to actually control that. You can always do something, take a course, talk to new people, network, take someone to lunch that's been a customer of your department and get to know them a little bit better. All of those are actually strengthening your career path.
And Ellen had a great suggestion when we were preparing for the panel, which was this is a networking event. And so to think about leaving this room and meeting 2 new faces before you go back, actually engaging with 2 new people, which I think is a great way to stop. The panelists will hang out for a little bit. They have business cards. We also have their bios, so you can follow up with them and learn a little bit more about their backgrounds at Harvard. And I want to thank all of you for being here and thank all the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.